Dozens of countries have condemned Russia's warning that foreign diplomats should leave Kyiv before it launches another massive attack on the city. The German Foreign Office summoned the Russian ambassador over the threat. This comes after Russia fired more than 100 drones overnight as it steps up its bombardment of Ukraine. Moscow said the latest attacks are in retaliation for a Ukrainian drone strike that it claimed hit a college dormitory in the occupied Luhansk region. Cafes in Kyiv have reopened despite Russian vows of further escalation. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Nimisha Jaiswal. She joins me from Kyiv. Nimisha, we saw this huge attack on Kyiv over the weekend, and now these new threats of escalation from Moscow. How worried are people in Kyiv?
Well, Terry, the attacks we experienced last Saturday were definitely terrifying. We saw people actually experiencing continuous explosions and barrages. My building was shaking. Many other buildings in central Kyiv was shaking. We could hear air defense at work as well as impacts. But on the other hand, air alerts and threats to residents of Kyiv are nothing new. They were asked to take them more seriously overnight, especially with the missile threat, and many people will. But an air alert actually just ended about 30 seconds ago before I started talking to you. So this is just a part of life here in Kyiv. Ukrainian authorities have called this blatant Russian blackmail. They have said that this is a brazen provocation. EU diplomats have also, when it comes to foreigners, said that we stand with Ukraine, we stay in Kyiv, dismissing Moscow's threats as nothing new, something that we've experienced for the last 4 years. China asked Moscow not to escalate without commenting on if it will pull out its diplomats. Interestingly, the most muted reaction seems to be coming from the U.S. It seems Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia directly warned his counterpart Marco Rubio, but Marco Rubio's comments seem to be that such an escalation is expected in a war, that the U.S. offers to help with peace talks, but not exactly the reaction you would expect from an American diplomat when it comes to almost a direct threat to its own citizens.
Now, Moscow says it's responding to a Ukrainian attack on a student dormitory in Luhansk. What do people in Ukraine think of that argument? Luhansk, of course, being an area of Ukraine that is now controlled by Russia.
That's right, Terry. Moscow says that its patience has snapped, in its words, because civilians were hit. Ukraine, of course, absolutely rejects this allegation. It says that it was targeting an elite drone unit in Russia-occupied Luhansk, and it says that it never targets civilians. Now, of course, many military bloggers here also pointing out that the time window between the attack in Luhansk and the strikes we saw in Kyiv was too short to prepare the massive strike that we saw here. Many military analysts also telling us that this escalation that Russia is threatening is more likely to be about three things. One, the humiliation of Putin having to ask for permission to hold the Victory Day parade in Moscow earlier this month. Secondly, the economic pressure and conditions in Russia that are causing dissatisfaction to many Russians. And thirdly, of course, Russia's inability to proceed on the front line to make any gains. We know that Ukraine is exerting complete drone dominance. Its mid-range strikes are pushing back not just Russian personnel, but also causing heavy loss of life. So clearly it seems that this escalation is a retaliation of Russia under pressure. Ukraine, on the other hand, insisting that it needs more air defense given the threats of these escalation. Last evening, President Zelensky expressed frustration that the U.S. is not giving it anti-ballistic missiles and insisted that the EU needs to step up in filling that gap.
Nimisha, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Nimisha Jaiswal, in Kyiv. Now let's get more on Russia's latest escalation. We're joined by Marina Miron. She's a military expert and a postdoctoral researcher in the Defense Studies Department at King's College London. Marina, is Russia using the Luhansk attack as an excuse for an escalation that was already planned?
Good afternoon, Terry. Well, the official Russian rhetoric is that it is a retaliation. That being said, we have seen many instances throughout the war of such retaliations, even from both sides, if you look at that. And I think it's important only for the informational psychological purposes, framing it as a retaliation, because the issue that we have to understand, the strike was very large scale involving different platforms, including naval platforms. It was a combined strike, meaning that it's not something that you can prepare very quickly. So the question is Russia able to prepare such a strike on such a short notice, or was this strike pre-planned and then the Luhansk matter happened, and then it was used as a trigger, perhaps, as a response, because there would be pressure building up inside Russia to respond to such attacks, and that has been going on even without the attack on the dormitory in Luhansk, what the Russian media is saying, but also the Ukrainian long-range drone attacks. And so the pressure has been building up for a harsher response to those Ukrainian drone strikes, and I think it might have been a combination of factors here.
Now, Russia hasn't exactly been making a lot of progress on the front line. Do these threats against the capital, Kyiv, that Russia is making, do those threats represent a degree of desperation from Moscow?
Well, in a sense, it is also a response to what the Russian military bloggers have been asking themselves for several years now. If you follow different popular military bloggers, you will see that there are always questions: why doesn't Russia strike the decision-making centers? Because what is happening on the battlefield is essentially an extension, but the center of gravity is elsewhere. And because we're seeing only grinding progress, and this war fatigue is setting in, certainly, and the pressure, also the economic hardships. And so you have this situation where people are dissatisfied with the conditions, and especially those in favor of the war are dissatisfied with the fact that there are political decisions precluding Russia from using its full military might. So it might also be that now there is this pressure to do something about this, and to also to calm the domestic moods in the first place, not just to try to change the situation on the battlefield. And to certainly what this would mean is that Russia is seeking to regain the strategic initiative in the military strategic terms. And so it should be taken with care, specifically because evacuation requests have been made. So it means that most likely we could see attacks similar to the one using Orashnik, perhaps not using Orashnik, perhaps just Iskanders and Kalibrs and Zircons maybe, but we might see a horizontal escalation on this level against decision-making centers, and specifically targeting the rear.
Just a quick final question, Marina. Ukraine's top negotiator, Rustem Umerov, has arrived here in Berlin for talks. There's speculation that officials from the UK and France could be involved too, as well as Germany. What do you make of this meeting and its timing?
It is an interesting timing because for Ukraine, it is a difficult situation right now as well. Some countries, or half of the countries, for instance, pulled out of the Ukraine ammunition initiative initiated by the Czech Republic. So for the Ukrainian side, even so the Russians have not managed to come up with a breakthrough, Ukraine needs to ensure either to secure some more aid, given the fact that the United States is now not participating or not participating much in delaying deliveries and weapon systems when it comes to helping Ukraine. But Ukraine, too, despite all the setbacks and the Russian situation domestically, still has to ensure that it continues a dialogue with its European partners and ensures continued support, not least because of military help, but also for economic purposes. And of course, we have to consider the diplomatic domain of this entire war and what might be happening in the future. And so from the Ukrainian side, should there be any sort of talks with the Russian side, especially when we're talking about higher level talks, it would be important for Ukraine to have some European representation on its side.
Marina, thank you very much. That was Marina Miron.
Thank you for having me.